Hi there. Hope you're having a great day so far. Well, homeschooling, distant learning, remote learning, whatever phrase that you actually use, I'm not actually sure I've heard or read one positive comment from a parent so far about the added pressures of having to set up and assist their children whilst they're being homeschooled in their remote and distant learning. But this is completely understandable given the circumstances that a lot of households are juggling at the moment, and that could be a whole list of different things. Given possible like job losses of parents, maybe that everyone is living within a multi-generational household with grandparents and other family members, and maybe even just the lack of space, amongst a whole list of other stuff. But one thing I guess we do have to keep in mind, and just remember that the move to this distant learning is really just to help reduce the spread of COVID-19, and this scenario is not going to be forever. However, the adjustment has meant that a lot of parents are still facing and feeling anxious and concerned with the move to distant learning. And to help to talk to us today, to give us some great tips, is Kate McMahon from Student Tutors. Now, Kate is going to share some handy tips and tricks to ensure that your household not only survives the home-based experience, but actually thrives in it. Now, Kate is an educator, a high school teacher, and an executive manager at Student Tutors, and amongst many things that she does at Student Tutors, she actually runs the distant education support program across Australia, which means that she's absolutely perfect expert and guest for us to be talking to today and to assist all of you guys with your remote learning and homeschooling at the moment. Thanks so much for joining us today, Kate. How are you?
Absolute pleasure. Tired but well. How are you?
Now, we of course know and understand that parents are not expected to be teachers or to teach, and or I guess to replace the role of a teacher. However, they are just asked to help observe and help support their children in their distant learning. And I think that's a really important point to keep making, to help sort of alleviate some of that pressure and the anxiety from parents. But still, I guess just the feeling in the anxiety, I think for many parents, is completely understandable and normal for parents at this time, purely just because they want the best for their kids. Now, in your line of work where you help support children in their distant learning through the programs, I'd love to understand from your perspective, do you see, because there's two different types of anxiety, I guess, because you've got, the anxiety of families who are setting up, which you help with distant learning and homeschooling on an ongoing basis. And then we've got the families at the moment that are just in this temporary scenario where they are having to support their children's learning through the likes of remote learning and that sort of stuff. So I'm just wanting to know from your perspective, in your experience, is there any difference in the different types of concerns and anxiety parents are showing in those two different scenarios, and or are they the same level of anxiety and concerns?
I mean, both anxiety is perfectly valid, but they are really different. So we often use the term homeschooling quite fast and loose at the moment. Homeschooling essentially is when a family, for whatever reason, whether they live remotely or whether the student is studying to be a dancer or an athlete professionally, and they, instead of going to school, they spend their time training, and then they'll do their homework in the afternoon when they finish or in their spare time. And that's a really long-term decision, as it would be if a parent has chosen to homeschool their child. And there are two ways that this might occur. So either the parent will be homeschooling and will be the teacher and the reporter and the monitor and have to report to the education authorities, or the student may study through a distance learning school where they study remotely, and we provide support to them in that capacity.
So they're permanent and ongoing scenarios, aren't they? Permanent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Permanent, ongoing scenario. So for parents, a lot of that anxiety comes at the start where they're making those decisions about whether it's the right decision, whether they have the resources in place, and a lot of day-to-day things we don't always think about, like who will supervise their exams, who will monitor their assessments, all those types of things. The situation we have at the moment in Australia is a little bit different. Of course, it's come about because of these COVID lockdowns to help stop the spread of this virus. So as teachers, we like to call it home-based learning, because the student's teacher is still setting all the work, marking all the work, and all of those assessments and exams are going ahead and being set and marked by the school. I think the anxiety for parents, though, is they've been thrown into this situation, the routine's gone out the window, and suddenly they've got the kids home, 9 till 5, or when they normally be at school, 9 to 8 till 4 every day, and they're having to make sure the students are doing the work where the teachers are usually in that role.
Yeah. But I guess the distant learning, remote learning to this scale is the biggest adjustment to any parents and child's lives, really, as we've actually known it en masse.
Definitely.
So, I'd love to know from your perspective, what are the typical things that children and parents struggle with initially when you are setting up someone in an ongoing sort of scenario, which would be completely relevant to a family who is, had initially sort of set up remote learning because they've had to, because the school's closed. And now, given that families have been in this scenario for a few weeks now, quite a few weeks, when do you think that they should start to feel this shift away from those initial sort of teething, setting up issues, problems?
I think the end of term 1 was a really tricky time for people, and the anxiety was really heightened. A lot of students were finishing off that term 1 work, especially senior students who had assessments and exams, and they all got shifted around. And a lot of students, I think, too, saw it as a bit of an early mark for the school holidays. So a lot of parents weren't being listened to and things like that in terms of completing work. Hopefully, by the end of this week, being week 2 or 3, depending on what state people are in, hopefully those students will have settled into a bit more of a rhythm with their schoolwork from home, and hopefully parents will be finding that. But not going to be the same for everyone. They might have settled in really well at the end of term 1, and then the school holidays might have knocked everything about.
Yeah. Well, what good habits do you think parents and their children should have really started to adapted now, and that they should be living, I guess, in the day-to-day scheduling on a day-to-day basis? What are those habits, do you reckon?
I think the best habits are routine. So getting up at the same time each day, hopefully that's being built, established well in a household, not only for students, but for parents working from home too. It's not practical to have your kids getting up an hour later than you are and making noise if you're on a conference call. Hopefully everyone's settled and knows what time they're starting their work for the day. Lunch breaks are another big thing, so making sure everyone knows where their scheduled breaks are. And having a good end to the day is also really important, so that students can clock off and they know it's time to, get outside and run about or whatever it is that they enjoy doing. And I think the other one is knowing their teachers' expectations. So by now they should know what the school has set up and what teachers have set up per subject, or if in primary school, for each subject throughout the day.
Now, just briefly explain to everyone watching and listening what you guys do, because we were chatting about it offline before, and what sort of ongoing distant learning that you set up, and for whom, and if there is anything else from what you guys do that we could really sort of help the listeners and everyone watching as well sort of take away from that, that would align and would be sort of be relevant, if anything at all.
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest market we have in terms of distance education support is for dancers. So full-time professional dancers have to start their training quite young. So if they want to be, say, a professional ballerina and go on to the Paris Opera Ballet, they need to actually be training throughout high school, and we work with a number of performing arts and dance academies to help support those students. So the students will be enrolled in a distance education school where a little bit like now, where the work is set online for them, the lessons are recorded for them, but we understand that those students don't always have the time or the independent learning skills yet to be able to translate what they're receiving from their teachers into having the work complete to a high quality. So our main role in that is to come on board with those students and to be that face-to-face academic support that they need to help organise and manage their time, as well as understand the content and return really high quality work. And I think the biggest tip through working with these students is that everyone's different and everyone's routine is different. So it's about establishing a routine that works for you. And if, say, you have a year 8 child in year 8, their normal timetable may not work for your house. You might have shift workers, or you might have mum or dad working at home and needing everything to be quiet. So, you know, it is okay to shift around those times where people are using the computer or using different rooms of the house, but making sure those routines are set up so students know when they're doing their schoolwork.
So many moons ago, I was actually a trained professional dancer, and in high school, I auditioned for the Victorian College of the Arts, which would be exactly what you're talking about, is where part of the day is actually to the dance classes themselves, and the second part of the day would be for education. I didn't end up doing that. I ended up just staying and completing year 12 and all of that stuff. But the point is that I always had a hobby on the side, which was dancing. And my point in bringing all of this long-winded stuff up is the fact that it taught me structure, because then if I had my schooling and then I had my hobby, I still had to do my homework and everything else in around it. So as you mentioned earlier on in the chat, the fact that the routine and structure is something that is critically important. We've spoken here at Kiddipedia to quite a few education experts, and they all say the same thing. It's all concurrent, is the fact that what parents should be adapting and have it well adapted by now, is what you've just mentioned earlier on, is the fact that they should have that strong routine and what parts of the day, you know, what happens and when, to be able to at least then balance their day. So yeah, thanks for that. Now, we published your article and the title is Homeschooling Tips. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article, can you give us a little bit of an overview what it's about, and just tell us what inspired you to write it?
I think the biggest thing it's about is, you know, hopefully alleviating some of those concerns that the parents have and all the pressure that's mounted on them at the moment, and trying to break those into the key important steps. And I think one of the biggest things that I tried to bring across in the article is to lower the bar a little bit. You know, it is an age of social media, and there are parents out there, you know, doing quinoa crafts with their children and harvesting vegetable gardens and things like that. And I think you can start to feel like a bad parent that you're not doing these things. And, you know, if you have time to, yes, they're wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's about engaging your children in learning, being supportive of their home-based learning situation. So being quite conscious of how you're reacting to the situation, because if you're negative about it, they will definitely pick up on that. So being really supportive, having that routine, and in the article we give some ideas about simple things that can break up the day and get your children engaged in learning. And learning can come in all shapes and forms. So arts and craft, getting out, running around the garden, that is all learning, being out in nature. Doesn't have to be sitting at your books writing.
Yeah. And we've had many interviews in the last few weeks that have said exactly the same thing, you know, and being bored also is a really great thing, because it then actually provides the opportunity for lateral thinking and to help develop creativity, in the sense for what can you do with everyday household items or whatever it is, to be able to expand your thought process, as opposed to us always being given something and always being, given the answers. Sometimes it's great to not always have the answers also, and to be able to create that space and that ability to be able to think sometimes, as opposed to just being told, I think is a really great gift I think we can give our kids, especially during this time. We don't always have to provide them with the answers and the things to do. It's fine to have that nice space, I think, which is really important. Now, I'd love to know from your perspective, what's the number one thing that a parent can be doing to ensure that their child has the best chance of learning at home?
I think, as I mentioned before, number one would be being supportive. There's so much negativity in the media at the moment surrounding home-based learning, and, anxiety is definitely valid, and that's understandable, and parents should be giving themselves a pat on the back for what they are doing. But it's about being supportive and using positive references when you're talking about schooling with your child, so that they know that the home is a good place to learn, and being supportive of whatever they are doing. Even if you're not sure of the answers that you said, be supportive and give them that space to think about what it might be, or be supportive in terms of an activity that they could do, or even just having some free time. It's about being supportive of the situation, because children are picking up on the anxiety that is around at the moment, and the more positive we can be about education, the more they'll know that it doesn't have to be in school. Learning is a lifelong process, and it's for everywhere, not just inside the classroom.
Are there any phrases that you, with the families that you work with, that you tell them to be able to say to their children, and or to help them feel supported, and to ensure that they are being as positive as possible? Or are there any that you can recommend that parents maybe use at all?
I think the best thing is, just have a go. A lot of children go straight from reading something to "I don't know." And, a great thing for parents to say is, "That's okay, you don't know yet. Let's learn about it together." Not everyone has the answers straight away. So just being positive and having a go is really the ideal thing at the moment.
And with the students that you usually work with, what are the most common issues and struggles that they encounter that families now would be experiencing themselves with the distant learning? What are the most common sort of issues and struggles that they have initially when they are starting their distant learning?
I think the two things are time and space. So not everyone has the perfect house for studying, and I think that's become really obvious at the moment, especially with families with multiple children, or sharing those resources at the same time. And I think the biggest thing is that you don't have to have the perfect space. It can be a corner of the kitchen table, and the students can get out their laptop or their books, their stationery, put some headphones on, and that's a perfect working environment. Or it could be a fully set up, office study. And the other thing is time. So again, back to that routine, time management. Kids really thrive on routine. We have a routine in classrooms. So the change to distance learning, whatever form that is, it's really important that they know when it's time to settle down and do their schoolwork, and when it's time to do their other activities, and that they know what's coming next.
So how can, I guess, a parent help sort of set up that routine each day for their kids to follow?
I think the best things for families, and I'm certainly recommending it, and I do recommend it to distance education families who do this permanently, is to create a timetable. So for our dance students, they'll have dance all day, and then they'll have marked off when they're doing their schoolwork, and then when they're having dinner and all those things, put it up somewhere visible in the house, so everyone in the house knows when it's school time and they know not to interrupt, or they know, and you can include work times and things for parents as well, just so everyone's aware of what's happening each day.
So, I mean, given the skills and everything that you set up for all of the other students that you work with, and the assistance of a tutor is generally in supplement of something else, isn't it? Generally. So how do parents know when it's actually time to ask and seek the assistance of a tutor?
I think the biggest thing that we try and communicate to people is that tutors aren't just for times of crisis. For example, 1 week before the final exams or things like that. Tutors can help with so many things. They can help establish a routine with a student or a family. They can help put together study plans and, you know, when's going to be the best time to study which subject according to the student's strengths. That can really help take the pressure off families, and we see that a lot with our distance education. It helps take the pressure off the parents so that they can be parents, and the tutor can be a little bit more in that role where the student is accountable to them, and the tutor can ask them, well, where's worksheet 3 and where's assignment 1, and we need to get that done. And that can be really nice for parents to be able to step back just into their caring role. And the other thing is obviously to reinforce learning, and that's really important too as we make our way out of this phase of, I guess, lockdowns and transition back into the classroom. Tutors, we're hoping, will be used more to help consolidate the learning that students have done during this home-based learning period, as well as extend them so that when they get back to the classroom, they're really up to speed with what they're learning.
So what do you usually use from a technology perspective that parents would be familiar with now that they've sort of dipped their toe in it per se, but that tutors use that that parents would expect to see if they continue to adapt, I guess, sort of distant learning from that perspective once the kids go back to school?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we at Student Tutors offer in-home tutoring, and as the lockdowns become lifted and we can start entering people's houses or libraries and things like that, face-to-face is often really great. And even face-to-face tutoring, we use a lot of online resources, so interactive games, models and activities, because students and children really actually quite enjoy that use of IT. But in terms of states, especially that are still in lockdown, things like Zoom, Google Classrooms and Google Hangouts are great places, and they're so interactive nowadays to be able to engage the student for an hour or whatever the time the tutoring session is, and go through those key skills and content knowledge.
And so to clarify, do tutors teach the national curriculum, or do you teach, as you mentioned before, the games and everything else, things that are supported by the national curriculum, or just to explain to parents what you actually teach and how that aligns to what the kids actually are learning at school?
So Student Tutors has always built itself on being in line with the Australian curriculum. So we don't have our own separate curriculum of skills. We want to reinforce and help the students by guiding them through the work that they're already doing at school and that they'll need for their exams and things like that. So we've always been about reinforcing that content knowledge and skills rather than showing them a whole bunch of different skills in supplement to that.
Mm-hmm. So not all tutors will necessarily teach the national curriculum, but you guys do. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's right. So a few tutoring companies do teach alternative curriculums, which have their own sets of content knowledge and skills, but we find it's the most helpful to be aligning with what's already been taught at the schools and in the Australian curriculum.
And so what benefits do you generally see in students that do have the assistance of an outside tutor, given that, aside from the I guess the obvious, the fact that they would have, the additional exposure to whatever that subject is and the assistance and everything else, is there anything else that you generally find?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is confidence. Often students can feel quite low in self-esteem or quite unconfident with subjects, especially the science, maths subjects. They'll automatically think they don't understand it, and maybe everyone else in the classroom does. So by being able to have a tutor, it helps them build that confidence with a subject, and the more confident they are, the more likely they're going to engage with that subject, and their knowledge and skills will automatically increase as a result.
Just had a thought. This is a little bit off topic maybe, but with I guess just the disappointing increase in school bullying and those types of things. A lot of kids might be very comfortable being home in the home environment and going through their day-to-day schoolwork at the moment through remote and distant learning. Do you personally just think that there may be more of an increase of families wanting to keep the distant and remote learning for those types of children who've maybe encountered, unfortunately, the likes of school bullying at all? Do you think that
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it will have opened up a bit of a discussion for parents and for families, in that there's not just one way to learn. There's not just, mainstream school. There are a lot of different education options. And it's certainly something that, has, as I said, been brought into the mainstream a little bit more, which I think is a really good thing. And it opens up people's minds about how we learn and the different ways that we can learn and different options that students have.
Do you think there's going to be a lot of kids that won't necessarily want to go back to school? They just want to stay home?
I don't know. My experience as a teacher, they're all pretty keen to get back and see their friends.
Yes,
But, I think there are a lot who have found the new resources that teachers are using are really interesting and really engaging. So I think that's definitely a positive.
Yeah. And do you think there's going to be, you are in a secondary school teacher, is that right? What class? You're a science teacher.
Science teacher, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that there's going to be change to the way that schools in the future, how they deliver sort of classes and education, given what we're learning currently at the moment, or do you think things will sort of stay the same?
I think something that's come about through this is really how independent students can be in their learning and how much material they can cover on their own, and then being able to use the classroom as a discussion platform and a way to build more skills rather than just the direct transmission of knowledge from teachers to students. So I think a lot of really interesting observations have come up from an education point of view. And I think for parents, being able to see so closely what's being delivered in the classroom has been a really positive thing, and hopefully will provide a bit more engagement from some parents.
I think it's going to be really interesting whenever the time comes that end of year school exams and those types of things come about, from the perspective and that with some of the other countries like Finland, I think it is off the top of my head, that they have reduced schooling hours every day, yet their grades and their grades are very, very strong and very good. Given that the children have exposure to all those other open-ended play experiences and the opportunity to be able to, as you just said before, develop their own critical thinking and those types of things as well. So given that children have had more of that experience with this distant and remote learning and being home in their own environment, I'm just thinking aloud at the moment, which I might just shut up, but I'm just thinking, it's going to be interesting to see if there is a shift in it, if for whatever reason they're, just to see how children have actually benefited from that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's and that's why I commented in the article, I don't think it's a time just to survive. I think it is a time to thrive, and we need to explore all these different things and, get the kids out of the routine of going from looking at their mobile phone to being in school to back on their mobile phone as soon as they get home, to look at all these different education options, these different activity options, and how families might interact differently. A bit of a new home dynamic would be quite interesting. And we're already looking at different things in education in terms of flipped learning, where students do the bulk of the reading at home and then class time is used for those collaboration and discussion, creative thinking, which has shown really promising results. So things like that may be rolled out more widely.
And what else do you think is really important for parents to be aware of at the moment, and or just to consider, especially for a parent who maybe is concerned that their children aren't necessarily getting enough, sort of academic sort of learning at the moment? What are your thoughts?
I think the first thing is to contact the school. Schools have been working right through the holidays to make sure learning platforms are really well rounded and that we're delivering that work to the students. So in terms of that, that would be my first recommendation. Contact the school and find out what is available. And a lot of teachers are happy to give students extension work that they can do if they do have a bit of more time on their hands. And the other thing, as we discussed, was looking at activities which are educational, but are often considered as a bit of folly or a bit of play, you know, getting outside, using their imagination, climbing trees, all those things, even simple things like board games, Monopoly, that's using logic skills and numeracy, and being a collaborative game, all those things are using their brain.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of experts explain that exact topic, that just because maybe they're not learning academically doesn't mean they're not learning. There's a lesson in every single thing that we do every day, and it's a matter of having that just perspective and that lens on it at the moment, and extracting out that lesson, and maybe even just be the lesson of patience. You have to wait until you see your friends. The lesson of resilience at the moment with what the world's going through, you know, all of these types of things really sort of to have the perspective of, okay, what is happening today and what is the lifelong lesson in this, as opposed to worrying so much about that, the academic. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the stage and age of the students. Year 12 students, obviously, it is quite an anxious time for them and their parents. Yes. And they're going to be wanting to get as much information and guidance from their teachers as they can at the moment. But students in primary school particularly, things like imagination and creativity and motor skills and logic skills, they're what's built into a lot of the activities. So any of those general play activities at home will help to support that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've given us some great tips today. If you were to summarize, I guess, the key messages for any particular parent with regards to your homeschooling tips, what are they?
I think first thing is take the pressure off. We're all doing the best we can, and every environment, every home and family is different, and you have to play to the strengths of that environment. You know, do the best you can to set up a routine and a space that's the same every day for the student, and make everyone aware of that. And the third would be, feel free to reach out to for help, whether that's to a tutor or whether it's to your school and teachers, because we're all here to help.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your chat today and for your time. If parents have got any other questions for you and or student tutors, whereabouts can they find you guys?
So they can find us on our website, studenttutors.com.au. I believe we'll provide the link to that. And we're always happy to help and to discuss your needs.
Thank you so much for your time, Kate. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity for another chat in the not too distant future. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.